Within the early hours of June the 7th of 1998, James Byrd Jr, an African-American man, he was brutally beaten and chained by his ankles to a pickup truck by 3 white men on a desolate country road. James's body would be torn apart in this horrific hate crime, his remains being found the next day and his head being found separated from his body, all because the colour of this man's skin. This is the harrowing, devastating case of James Byrd Jr. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. Oh yeah. Today I am back covering a very important case. You know how I feel about these kinds of cases. It is the case of James Byrd Jr, an African American man who yet again was targeted, all because the colour of his skin. 3 white men who identified themselves as white supremacists. They would target James in the early morning hours when he was just walking back home from a party. I don't want to ramble too much because this case is just so important and I just really want to get into it. Before we dive in, if you're new here, hi, my name is Anna. I am a certified yapper. One day I decided I was going to hop on the internet, yap about true crime, all things that I'm interested in, and find a community of people like myself. And I did. If true crime is your jam, I highly suggest that you subscribe, get the notification bell on, because I'm here for you twice a week, every single week, with a brand new interesting true crime case. And if you're a regular here, if you're already part of the fam, you know the drill. Get in the comments, leave a like, maybe share the video if you feel obliged, because it really helps out with the channel, helps boost me out to the YouTube algorithm. Any details that you need regarding me, myself and I, products used on my face, social media handles, case suggestion documents, my channel, my playlist, everything you need, it is all linked down below. But without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the case of James Byrd Jr. So I'm thinking to start off this case, I feel like it's really important to talk about James Byrd Jr, who he was, what he meant to people, what he was like as a person, and just elements of his life in general, just so we can get an idea of the kind of man the world lost when these 3 men did what they did. So James Byrd Jr, he was born on May the 2nd of 1949 in Beaumont, Texas. And he was a third of 9 children to Stella Mae Sharp and also James Byrd Sr. Now, James came from a really good family. His mother was a really well-respected Sunday school teacher. She was loved and adored in her area of work. His dad did really well for himself as well, as his father had become a deacon at the Greater Bethel Church. And I'm sure it doesn't really come as much of a surprise, but a lot of James's early life, his childhood, his teenage years was spent in and around church, of course, because his mum and dad both worked for the church. James was someone who really enjoyed singing. He played piano. He had a really great musical ear. He was really gifted in that area. And it was something that he really loved and something that he had taken from the church and implemented in his day-to-day life. I love that I always say I barely drink fizzy juice, and yet every video I seem to have a fizzy drink. I swear I only have it like once a week, twice a week, maybe 3, I don't know. So in his teen years, James had attended Jasper Row High School, and this was basically the last segregated school before it was consolidated with Jasper High School. And just in case you're not aware, segregation, it's basically a practice where people are separated from each other due to factors like race, gender, social class, all that jazz that really shouldn't matter, but somehow people try and make out that it does. So within the school at this point, black children and white children, they were completely segregated from each other. Like, they weren't able to cross paths, they never attended the same classes, their breaks were at different times, so they avoided seeing each other, which is just so outrageous. Within his high school classes, academically, James did really well. He really worked hard, he really applied himself in all of his classes, he got excellent grades. And socially, he was very well liked, he was admired by his fellow peers. He was just known to be this really good, friendly person with a really outgoing personality that would just talk to anyone. So James goes on to graduate from high school in 1967. He definitely had the grades to go to college if he really wanted to. but he decided he didn't want to follow in his sister's footsteps, and instead he begins dating a woman by the name of Luvon Harris. The pair date for a while, and then by 1970 they get married. And this relationship at the very start was really strong and really happy, so much so that they went on to have 3 children together: Renee, Ross and Jamie. So James was the kind of person that he worked really hard, and especially when he knew that he had other people relying on him. So he's got a wife, he's got 3 children, he wants to be a good provider for them. So he would honestly take any job that came up. He worked multiple jobs, and the one that he really enjoyed in particular was when he was working as a vacuum salesman. It was quite a sociable job, so he got to talk to people on the daily, and this was something he just really enjoyed. So James is really thriving in this area of work, but he had actually developed a seizure disorder which would cause him just to have random seizures. He couldn't really tell when they were going to happen, and because of this he had to give up his work that he loved so much, and this of course had a detrimental effect on his mental health. So in terms of his marriage to Luvon Harris, how did it start off? It was really great. They had a very loving and happy relationship. They made each other laugh and smile every single day. It was really evident to everyone around them, including their children, just how much they loved each other. People were almost jealous of the relationship that they had because they were so in love. And this marriage, like any other marriage, had its ups and downs, its challenges, its triumphs. But it would get to a point where the downs were outweighing the ups. And sadly, this just started to become a really unhappy, unhealthy marriage. I'm sure we all know and realise this, but you can have the most amazing partner in the world, you can have the most amazing family, the most amazing friends, the best job, the best work colleagues, you can have amazing children, but sometimes that isn't enough when you're not happy inside. Because we all know the person that seems like they have everything can also be suffering greatly inside. And sadly, James was. As you can imagine, his mental health being on a decline, not being able to work, staying in the house, feeling like he's not really providing for his family, it really took a toll on James, and he went to a really dark place, and he had turned to alcohol. And if any of you have had someone in your life, or even yourself, have struggled with alcohol or addiction, then you will know yourself that this disease will turn people into someone that you don't recognise. It will also make them act in a way that they never would have without this. Because this disease will just make people do things and say things that's so out of their character that you just don't recognise them anymore. So throughout James's struggle with his alcoholism, he had turned to things like petty theft, forgery. He was doing whatever he had to do to be able to feed his disease, his alcoholism. He needed money to buy alcohol to fund this disease. And like I said, it was making him do things and say things that he wouldn't normally do. Now, because of the crimes that James was committing, he would end up in and out of prison multiple times. When he was out, he'd violate his parole and then he'd be incarcerated again. And this was something that just took a huge toll on his family and especially his marriage. And this wasn't something that just lasted for a little while. This is something that James would struggle with from 1969 all the way up till 1996. So at this point, the alcohol, the incarcerations, the reoffending, the in and out of prison, not being able to rely or trust James anymore, this really took a toll on Luvon, and she knew that James was a good man, but the man standing in front of her wasn't the man she fell in love with. She knew that she had to protect herself, protect her children, and so she decided that she had to leave James. Because as much as James would try, and as many promises as James would make that he would try and ditch this disease and get better, he was never really ready to get better, and things just kept getting worse and worse. And what's just amazing is, despite all the challenges that James had faced, the crimes that he had committed, the fact that he had been to prison, that didn't matter to anyone. Everyone knew the type of person that James truly was, and he was very well liked within the community. He was very well respected, he was trusted. People realised that the actions and the things that he had done wasn't a reflection of him as a person, but a reflection of the disease that he was suffering from. They all felt that he deserved forgiveness. Now, at the time of James's death, he was currently unable to work due to his seizure disorder. He was often seen walking around town, chatting away to people. He wasn't able to drive because of this disorder that he had. So he didn't have a car, he had no way of getting about apart from walking or public transport. At the moment, he was currently living within government housing and he had a disability allowance to allow him to keep living life whilst he navigates the seizure disorder that seems to be hindering him from doing the things that he wanted. And whilst this sort of thing, the government house and the disability allowance, these were things that previously made James feel so unworthy. But throughout his recovery, he had realised that this is actually an opportunity to keep living life, to still be able to do things and enjoy life. And so he felt very grateful for it. So over the next couple of years, the thing that was most important to James was rebuilding his connections, rebuilding his friendships, his relationships with his family, with his children, with his ex-wife, and he would spend most of his time with his family. This is the thing that he really enjoyed, and this is exactly what he was doing on June the 6th and June the 7th of 1998. So hopefully the timeline at this point isn't going to get too confusing, because I'm going to talk about the night of June the 6th and the early morning of June the 7th, but when I say early morning of June the 7th, I mean like after midnight on June the 6th. So like it's really, really early on the 7th, but really, really late on the 6th. Anna, just shut up. I think you get what I mean. So on the night of June the 6th of 1998, James had been over at his parents' house. They were celebrating his niece's bridal shower. And after the bridal shower, he was going to leave and attend a friend's anniversary party. And this party was happening quite close by, so we didn't have far to walk because, as we know, James walks everywhere that he goes. So he goes, he enjoys his friend's party for a little while, and then he says his goodbyes around 1 a.m. and he tells his friends that he's heading home for the night, he's going to walk home and he'll see them when he sees them. But what his friends could never have imagined about that night is that that was the last time they would ever see James Byrd Jr. alive. So James is on his way home, he's walking down the street and he would be intercepted by 3 men. Now these men were allegedly drunk, but they were driving a vehicle and they stop by at James and ask if he needs a ride home. So in this truck, the 3 men was Sean Allen Berry, Lawrence Russell Brewer, and John William King. Now Sean Berry, he had sort of known of James just from seeing him around town. Like I said, James was always walking about, talking to people, so Sean had seen him walking on the streets some days. And James had recognised Sean, which made him feel safe enough, I suppose, to get into the truck with these 3 men. But what James Byrd Jr. did not know that night is that the vehicle that he got into with those 3 men were white supremacist scumbags. And if you've been here for a while, you will know that the whole white supremacy, even that word alone, makes my skin crawl. It is disgusting and vile and just completely evil. I do want to give a bit of background on these 3 monsters because I just want you to realise the kind of people they are before we even get into what they did to James Byrd Jr. So starting off with Sean Allen Berry, he was born and raised in Jasper, Texas. He was local to the area and he was known as a local hometown boy. Now he worked as a manager at a local movie theatre and this was something he really enjoyed because he enjoyed being able to socialise during his work, on his breaks. It was sort of in the centre of town, so it really worked well for him. Sean would participate a lot in local rodeos and he was described as a would-be cowboy. What does that mean? Like he would have been a cowboy had he not been a complete POS, I don't know. So Sean Berry, he was in a relationship with a young girl or young woman by the name of Christy Marcantel, and he would spend a lot of his time with her, and if he wasn't with Christy, he would be with his friends. Now when people spoke about him later on, they did just say that he was this ordinary, normal guy. He was heavily involved in community activities. I don't know if that was just the rodeos, I'm not sure. And it is also worth stating, even though I really don't think it means much, but prior to the murder of James Byrd Jr., Sean Berry didn't actually have a criminal record. He didn't even really have any interactions at all with the police. It seemed like he was this clean-cut, ordinary guy until this horrific day. But with that being said, I would just like to say that I do not believe for a second that someone who hasn't already had these evil thoughts would commit something so heinous and so disgusting, vile and evil as their first murder. I don't buy it for a second. There is no way you would allow to happen what happens to James if you weren't already an evil scumbag yourself. Now also, friends and family of Sean Berry, they had came forward as well and explained that Sean Berry had never once said any racist remarks. He didn't say anything racially motivated or nasty or anything that would make anyone believe that he hated people of colour. And again, I just find it hard to believe that you don't have racial hate when you can commit something so heinous. And then we have Lawrence Russell Brewer, which, I mean, honestly, it just gets worse and worse as it goes down the line. But he was known to be a very proud and very open white supremacist. Just turned my own stomach having to say that. He was very, very open in his practice of white supremacy. He would tell every Tom, Dick, Harry, Fran, Sally that this is what he was into. He was very proud of his beliefs. He would shout his white supremacy beliefs from the rooftops if you let him. He had also spent a significant amount of time in prison. A lot of this was for racially motivated crimes, robberies, violent assaults, just some really, really horrible stuff. And this is actually where he would meet John King in prison. Prison buddies. Oh, and also they were also in the same white supremacy gang within prison. And I know I've already painted a picture of just how out and proud this guy was with his white supremacy and all that, but this clown, he had tattoos all over him that was racially motivated. He had Nazi symbols. He had a black man being hung from a noose tattooed on his skin. He had racist sayings and remarks tattooed over him, and he also claimed to be a member of the KKK. The Ku Klux Klan. And delving into this guy's background, it really does seem that his life was just marked by violence and racial hatred toward people of colour. And I'm honestly just sick and tired of wasting my breath on speaking about these three idiots, but as far as John King goes, he is a control copy-paste of Lawrence Brewer. They're basically the same person, they have the same beliefs, they've got the same kind of tattoos. They very much vocalise their opinions, their racial hatred and their love of white supremacy. And if I have to say that word one more time, I'm going to be sick. So going back to the early hours of June the 7th of 1998, James Byrd, who is only 49 years old at this point, he has accepted a ride from these three men, and Sean Berry is the one who's driving. Sean Berry is the one who has invited him into this car. So when the men had offered James a ride, he explained that he was on his way home and, if they're giving him a ride, is it okay if they drop him off home? To which all three men had agreed. But they did not have any intention whatsoever of taking this man home. So instead of taking James home, these three men, they drive James to a remote country road that was outside of town. And once they're there, James asks them, why are we here? This isn't where I'm meant to be. I asked you to take me home. I don't want to stop off anywhere. And they basically tell him that he has no choice. And they very aggressively and very violently pull him out of the vehicle and throw him onto the ground. At this point, once James is on the ground, these three horrific monsters, they start to brutally beat him. Within an inch of his life, they are trying to render him helpless. And he is begging and pleading with them to please let him go. He won't say anything, he just wants to get home. But these men had absolutely no intention of letting James Byrd Jr. out of this situation alive. At this point, they have beaten him so brutally and viciously that he's black and blue with bruises. He has blood, there's cuts, he's got fractured ribs, he's struggling to breathe. And then they proceed to take a can of spray paint and spray paint his entire face before then urinating and defecating on this man. Just the ultimate disrespect and disregard. So after they have brutally beaten and humiliated this man in every single way they possibly could, they then take a chain that is attached to the pickup truck, they attach it to James' ankles, and then they proceed to slit his throat. Slit his throat, but it's not deep enough that he's going to bleed out, it's not deep enough that it's going to kill him, and in fact, it would later be determined that James was very much alive for around 90% of what was about to happen to him. The three men, they then get into the pickup truck and they would proceed to drive at high speed for 3 miles on Huff Creek Road, dragging James along the ground. James is fighting and trying his best to hold his head up off the ground to try and ensure that no damage is done to his head. And as hard as this man's trying to fight to survive, it wouldn't work, because halfway through him being dragged by this pickup, James's body would hit a culvert, and this is where his life would end, when his arm was severed and his head was decapitated. And after this horrifying, disgusting, evil murder, these 3 men, they get out of this pickup truck and they just admire their work. They look at James's remains hanging onto the back of that pickup truck, and they decide that the best thing they could do is dump his remains outside of an African American cemetery. All 3 of them would then drive off and enjoy the rest of their night. They attended a friend's barbecue and they had not a care in the world. They did not care what they had just done. There was no guilt, there was no remorse. They just had a great night enjoying themselves. And the thing that is just so alarming and disturbing about this murder is the fact that it echoes lynching traditions from post-Civil War. These traditions included things such as mutilation, decapitation and revelry. By murdering someone in such a brutal and heinous way and then going off to celebrate it with a barbecue or a picnic. And this is exactly what these 3 men had just done. So later on the morning of June the 7th of 1998, a man was out a walk with his grandson, and devastatingly they would come across the mutilated remains of James Byrd Jr. outside that African American cemetery on Huff Creek Road. Like, can you imagine, you're just going about your day, you're taking your grandson on a morning walk, and this is the kind of sight that you see and that your grandson sees? Now, he alerts the authorities immediately, and when the authorities come around, at first they think that James might have been the victim of a hit and run, someone who has just hit him with a car that's caused his body to mutilate in the most severe way and then driven off. But very, very quickly they would realise that this hadn't been the case, and James's death had been the result of something much more heinous. So when police arrive, they are surveying the area, they're looking for any clues as to what might have happened, and they notice there's tyre skid marks along the road. So they're following these for a bit, and then they start to see blood where these skid marks are. And this is when they're very quickly putting 2 and 2 together, and they realise that James's body has been dragged along the ground. But at this point they didn't know whether he had been dead or alive at the time of this dragging. Now, not too long after James's remains had been found, the 911 dispatchers, they would receive a call from a woman who had found his head and shoulder in a ditch in front of her house. Now, James's head was still intact at this point, and that is what told investigators that James had been very much alive throughout this dragging, and that he had been alive right up until his decapitation. So this search for evidence that the investigators and the police were on, this would eventually lead them to a trail of all different kinds of items. Shirts, dentures, keys, a shoe, and many other articles of clothing. And they would find 81 separate spaces where James's remains could be found. Like blood, flesh, body matter, just scattered everywhere. Now the police, they continue on this investigation. They are looking for more evidence that would lead them to the person or people who had committed this crime. And at one point, they find a wrench-like tool, and this tool has the name Berry etched into the metal. They then also find a flip-top lighter, and on this lighter was written the word possum. Now possum had been the prison nickname of John King. Very quickly they are putting together who their men are and who it is that they need to arrest. Now a witness would also come forward and say that they had actually seen James Byrd Jr. in the back of a pickup truck with 3 white males. So they've got the wrench with Berry on it, they've got the flip-top lighter with possum. Now they know they were in a pickup truck, and they're able to determine that Sean Berry owns a pickup truck. And this information with this evidence quickly led them to Sean Berry, Lawrence Brewer and John King. The minute the police pick up Brewer and King, they know exactly who they are, the type of people that they are. They know that they are white supremacists who have all these racial hatreds and beliefs instilled into them. And it was quickly determined by state law enforcement that due to the nature of the crime, this was in fact a hate crime. All three of these men, they would be arrested and charged with capital murder, and they would all face 3 separate trials. So 1 trial each, but 3 separate trials for each of them. Where's my mind? Why do I keep saying stupid stuff? So during the trial of Sean Allen Berry, the prosecution, they would concede and basically agree that they don't believe that Sean Berry was a white supremacist. Despite the murder that he committed and despite the company that he keeps, which is outward white supremacists, make that make sense. I think if you're associating with people like that who's literally got tattoos of black men being hung on their body, that says something about you as well. They say this, but they do argue that he is just as responsible for the death of James Byrd Jr, especially with it being his pickup truck and him that was driving. So whilst he is apparently not a white supremacist, he was a thrill-kill murderer. Within his trial, his attorney had brought forward 3 black men to testify in front of the jury to say that Sean Berry is not a racist because Sean Berry likes us. I'm pretty sure that Sean Berry can play a character outwardly. He can pretend that he is a nice guy and not express those opinions in public because he knows they're wrong and that people will disagree with him. But that doesn't mean that behind closed doors with his friends, that he's not a racist. Now, during his trial, Sean had stated that Brewer and King were solely responsible for the murder of James Byrd Jr, stating that he had actually tried to intervene and stop them attacking him, but Brewer had turned around and threatened to kill him if he stopped them killing James. Now, Lawrence Brewer, he would come forward and testify within Sean Berry's trial, and he stated that Sean Berry had been the one to slit James's throat before he was dragged along at the back of the pickup truck. But for the jury and for prosecution, there wasn't really enough evidence to prove this. Now, it had been stated by the jury, by the prosecution, by the defence, etc., that Sean Berry was the only person out of the 3 men who actually showed any form of remorse for the crimes that he had committed. Now, because he showed remorse and because it seemed like he actually cared, which again could just be an act, he would only receive life in prison, and he will actually be eligible for parole in 2038 when he will be 63 years old. And I pray to God that this man never ever sees the light of day because he is just evil, he is a coward, and he did not take responsibility for what he did to James. And honestly, for all I care, he can rot in hell. I also find it hilarious that I'm sitting here giving it the big one and I had just got black eyeliner all over my cheek, but I'm just going to blend it in and hope for the best. Now, if like me you were angry with the outcome for Sean Berry, this might help make you feel a tiny bit better because it helped me the tiniest bit, knowing that this man is locked up for 23 hours a day, 7 days a week. He gets out for 1 hour of exercise, and his little cell that he has to sit in all day is only 8 feet by 6 feet. My boyfriend probably couldn't even stretch out in that. Now, during Lawrence Brewer's trial, he really did just provide the sword for his own back because he just openly admitted to what he had done. He was proud of what he had done, and he basically stated that he would do it again if he had the chance. A psychiatrist had even testified at his trial and deemed that he was in fact a racist psychopath. They also stated that he was not repentant for his crimes whatsoever, and that this man should never see the light of day. Thankfully, Lawrence Brewer, when he was convicted, he would be sentenced to death. And the day before his execution on September the 21st of 2011, Brewer had stated once more that he had absolutely no remorse or regret for anything that he had done. And he said this: "As far as any regrets, no. I have no regrets. No. I'd do it all over again to tell you the truth." And that is a kind of scumbag that was walking this earth. Thankfully though, he would be executed and taken away, hopefully to hell, to burn, to rot, to be tortured every single day for eternity. So for John King at his trial, he didn't really defend himself either, to be completely honest. He was accused of beating James Byrd with a bat and then also being the one to drive the pickup truck with him attached at the back, but that obviously can't be confirmed because he blamed Sean Berry and Sean Berry blamed him, and it was Sean Berry's pickup, so no one really knows. And I suppose the only person that really does know now is Sean Berry, but I'm not expecting him to tell the truth. And this is honestly just insane, but John King, he tries to say that the reason that he committed this crime, the reason that he felt entitled to take an innocent man's life, is because he stated that when he was in prison for all the crimes that he had committed, that he was consistently gang raped by a group of black men. Isn't that just convenient? Convenient that it would be a group of black men because he killed a black man. I never want to take away from anyone's trauma, and I never ever want to say that anybody is lying, but to me, John King is a noted liar, and I do not believe this happened. He's trying to basically defend racism with racism, and he just looks like an absolute clown. And thank goodness that no one in this court was buying this man's. They knew exactly the kind of person that he was, the kind of evil monster that he was, and he would be found guilty and sentenced to death. He would then be executed by lethal injection on April the 24th of 2019. And I do really hope that the information that I've given you regarding James Byrd Jr. today, I hope that describes the kind of amazing man that he was. He was a man just looking to turn his life around, get back on track, enjoy his life with his family, be there for his children, for his friends, overcome his alcoholism and help other people who are struggling with the same thing. But his life was just stolen from him. After the murder of James, there were some changes that came into play, and I have just bullet pointed them on a list just so I didn't forget any. So I just want to run through these just so you're aware of the changes that took place on the back of James Byrd Jr.'s death. So there was legislative changes. His murder had led to the passage of the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act in 2009, which expanded federal hate crime laws to include crimes motivated by a victim's actual or perceived gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. And also after the murder of James, hate crimes law in Texas in 2001, Texas had passed its first hate crimes law in response to Byrd's murder. There was also a rise in public awareness, which is so important in these sorts of cases, that awareness is raised and that the public educate themselves on the kind of things that take place and the kind of things that happen around them. And whilst researching this case, I did also learn that Brewer and King, they were the first white men in Texas history to be sentenced to death for the murder of a black man. And that to me is absolutely insane, because if you look up death in Texas and you see the sort of murders that happen, there is plenty of white people who have murdered black people who have got off on much lighter sentences. So whilst it's great that this happened at this point, why the hell is it taking so long? What about all the other people who have lost their lives to men like Brewer and like King? Now, James Byrd's family, his children, especially his son Ross, he is actually a victims advocate. He does a lot of really incredible work. Thing is, with James's family, as you know about James himself, when we talked about his childhood, he was very religious, he was always in church, and he very much instilled this on his children as well. So whilst they wanted to see their father get justice, they didn't think the death penalty was the right way to go. They believed in their religion that it should have been left up to the Lord to make that decision. Now, because of the effect that James Byrd Jr.'s murder had on the community within Texas, loads of members of public, teachers in school, they did so much to raise awareness regarding racial hatred, and they did their best to resolve any racial tensions and also try and form some sort of unity to try and ensure that these things didn't happen, because they should never have happened in the first place. But my loves, that is it for another true crime and makeup episode. I really hope this one was interesting for you. I know it was such a harrowing case and so difficult to get through and so difficult to research, knowing that this happened to this incredible man, all because the colour of his skin. But these cases always feel so important for me to tell. If you haven't already, I would love if you could go over and watch my cases on Willie Francis as well as George Stinney. They were two very young boys who the justice system just completely failed. Again, all due to the colour of their skin. And if you are someone out there who feels like you're maybe not educated on Black history, about Black punishment, unfair treatment, racially motivated attacks and murders, or how Black people and people of colour are treated within the justice system, I will leave some resources down below. Please check them out, read over them, listen to them, because it is so important that we are all educated and that we're all aware about what has taken place in the past and what still happens now, because it needs to stop. Before you go, please make sure you like, comment and subscribe. Get the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload every Wednesday and Sunday. That's twice a week, every single week. All the details you need regarding me, myself and I, product details, social media handles, case suggestion documents, it is all listed down below for you. But that is it for today. As always, please, please, please remember, be a good person, do not be a bad person, stay safe, look after each other, educate yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!